Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of Politics. I am Bo Talbot, here joined by Alex Yanikowski. And,
Hello, everybody.
Taylor Jeffrey Doom.
yeah,
Ooh.
TJ's finally back after a too long hiatus. Finally, someone other than Alex and I will be speaking. To start off the episode 9 of Politics, we go to the impeachment of U.S. President Donald Trump, which has finally ended in a verdict that absolutely no one saw coming. The President of the United States was acquitted by the Republican-controlled Senate. What? I
What?
know. No, okay. In all seriousness, President Trump was acquitted today by a vote of 52 to 48 on the abuse of power, voting not guilty, and 53 on 47 voting not guilty on obstruction of justice. Mitt Romney, a representative from Utah, was the only one who voted to. He was the only Republican to vote guilty on the abuse of power charge. No, everyone saw this coming. Everyone knew that Trump was going to be acquitted. No surprises here.
Yeah, no, especially after the vote for to not have witnesses, which was very disappointing from the Republicans, especially Republicans like Susan Collins, who or I believe Martha McSally, who didn't vote for witnesses, even though they stated that they wanted witnesses. And polls showed that, all right, there wasn't a large majority of people who wanted him removed from office. There was 51% of people who wanted him removed. Then there was an extra 60. There was a 63% of people in the United States who wanted more witnesses and wanted more information to be presented at the trial. Basically, they wanted a fair trial. Trump never got a fair trial. It was just biased towards him. No witnesses, no new information, no documents. It's just been an absolute shutdown from the Republicans. And, well, I wouldn't say it's called the Republican Party anymore. I think it's called the Trump Party now. To be honest, it's so disappointing that they can't look at the information in front of them, because the case is clear. Trump did something wrong. The Democrats did have enough uh, evidence to prove that case, but the Republicans didn't care. And now that's opened the floodgates for Trump to do whatever he wants in his presidency. He can go out and ask China to investigate whoever they want in the United States, as long as they're against Trump, and that would be fine, because, well, Congress acquitted him, the Senate acquitted him. So it's very disappointing from that point of view.
What happened to the days where, like the president would just get like the CIA or the NSA to do it? It's cheaper then.
Asking for foreign intervention.
to be fair, like, yes, that could be the case. But thing is, like, from the impeachment trial and the impeachment and the witnesses that came in front of the intelligence and judiciary committees, we saw that there has been pushback from the people that work in the departments, the people who are civil servants and not appointees. They're there no matter who's president, no matter which party is in charge. They're gonna be there, and they stood up to Trump, and that's why we had the whistleblower. That's why we had people come and testify against Trump, showing him that there was always been something wrong. And so he couldn't do this through his normal channels as any other president would be able to do. But the thing is, again, that's very tenuous in the way that's put forward, and because of Trump's friends that are around him, and the people that are around him, such as Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman and Giuliani, yes, all of those people are not. They're shady, and so is Trump with whatever he's done previously in his business. And he is a shady president, and he didn't want to. He wanted to close the loop on the amount of people that knew about his doings in Ukraine, about everything that's happening.
I think the main issue here is I was reading an interview with Susan Collins about why she chose to not vote guilty, and I think her main argument was that the Democrats did not argue whether or not what Trump did was illegal. They argued whether or not what Trump did broke his oath of office. So the Democrats didn't. They went on an abuse of power charge and an obstruction of Congress charge. They didn't go after a campaign finance law. They didn't go after a treason charge or anything like that by inviting a foreign power in. Their main claim was an abuse of power charge, which is subjective in all things. And also, I think which is just honestly, I've said this so many times privately, but I'll say it here. The Democratic Party never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And they didn't run this trial very well. I thought it was rushed. I thought Nancy Pelosi made a misplay when she took so long to send the charges over to the Senate, over 30 days.
She played into McConnell's hand at that point.
Which I 100% agree with. I 100% agree with that.
I would argue against that. I disagree. Because of her holding it up, yes, she didn't get the witnesses, but it was a 51-49 vote. She was so close. The pressure that was building on these, on the senators that are up for re-election, Lamar Alexander is not going to be. He's not going to be going for re-election, but Susan Collins, Martha McSally, they were vulnerable, and that's why just before the vote, I think a few days before the vote, McConnell came out and said that he didn't have the votes to shut down witnesses, and now he has, and he did. The Democrats were so close, and as you said, they lost that opportunity to grasp it, to get something out of it. And yes, that worked. It worked to an extent where they got, I believe, two Republicans over to their side. But at the same time, it just wasn't enough. I don't think holding the articles longer would have changed that, but I feel like McConnell got to his own Republicans, and they were able to unite, other than Susan Collins and Mitt Romney in the witnesses section. But that's just the way that it worked.
Speaking of another Democratic Party blunder, we turn our attention to the Iowa caucus. Oh my gosh. You've had so many years to prepare for this. All right, so so what happened in Iowa? For those who don't know what's going on.
So starting on Saturday, I wouldn't say it was red flags.
The first signs. Yeah, the first signs.
First signs. So the Des Moines Register, which is the biggest newspaper in Iowa, who does some of the most reliable polling in Iowa for these elections. They weren't able to publish their polling results for the biggest poll that really mattered, the last one before the caucuses that was meant to go out on Saturday. It didn't go out because Pete Buttigieg's name was not mentioned from one of the questionnaires because of basically user failure, user error, and they were unable to do that. Then when Monday came, and the people came out to caucus, they came out to vote, and they were testing out they were using a new app made by the company Shadow to transmit those totals into from the precincts to the Democratic Party to see who won, basically the results. There was an issue with that app, a coding issue, where the results weren't coming in correctly. There was inconsistencies with the results. Some people from the caucus sites saying that they were unable to submit their results through the app. They were unable to download the app. Granted, some of this is mostly user error, but there was an issue, and we still don't have the results. We've only had 71% of all the caucus areas.
Make that 80. Make that 85. 85%.
Oh,
85%.
That just came out. Thanks, Bo. But so we've only have 85% of all the results that are currently out. We don't have 100. By this time, last election cycle, we already had all the information who won Iowa, and this caused a lot of confusion because all the candidates were set up speeches they were going to make after Iowa, saying that either, well, unfortunate that we lost, but we're going to move on, or like, look, we've made this massive victory. And so they were set up, and of course they made their speeches, but a bit lackluster. And there were attacks on the Pete Buttigieg campaign because Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg had internal numbers because they have their own volunteers who are in those caucus sites. They had their internal numbers that say that they have won Iowa. Both campaigns believe that's the case. And so Pete came out quite strongly that they've won Iowa. And people were berating him online saying that, well, he didn't win Iowa. He couldn't have won Iowa because, well, we don't have the results. But now looking at the results that have come through, Bo, if would you like to fill us in on the current results?
All right, so the current results right now, Pete Buttigieg has 11 delegates with 26.7% of the vote. Bernie Sanders has 11 delegates with 25.4% of the vote. Now, reminder, it kind of works like the Electoral College system. Currently, Sanders is winning the popular vote, but that doesn't matter. It's the delegates that matter. It's the delegate vote, and Buttigieg has a slight edge with 26.7%. Elizabeth Warren has 5 delegates with 18.3%. Joe Biden has 0 delegates with 15.9%. Klobuchar has 0 delegates with 12.1%, and Yang has 0 delegates with 1%. No one else is even close. Just those delegates haven't been assigned for those like Biden and Klobuchar yet, just because all the results aren't in. They haven't fully given it out yet. But at this, I remember I was watching ABC's coverage of the caucuses, NBC's coverage of the caucuses, and they said by about like 10 o'clock on caucus night, they had already had 80% of the results in 2016. 80% on the first night. It is now 2 days after, as the caucuses were on February 3rd. This is February 5th. And they only have 85% of the results. Guys, Democrats, it's Iowa. How do you expect the citizens of the United States to throw their support behind a party that cannot run a statewide caucus in Iowa that has one of the smallest populations in the United States? The Republican primary, on the other hand, went flawlessly. I mean, we knew Trump was going to win, but he won 97% of the vote. The results were out that night. This is insane. This is just another setback for the party, and it's not looking good for 2020.
Crazy to think, as a registered Democrat, that this party, my party, is failing to even go through with democracy at this point. They're failing to even strive for the democratic goals that they've been setting under this administration, and it's frustrating to see them fail.
Right, because the main thing about 2016, the Russians interfered with the election. This was known. The Mueller report came out. The Democrats decried the results of 2016, saying, our candidate won. She won the popular vote. She should have won the electoral vote. Without Russian interference, Hillary Clinton would be president of the United States. Okay, you take that. She didn't win. You don't let it go, which has been a huge critique of the Democratic Party. Move on. 2020 is your chance, all right? You got a chance. You had impeachment. You messed. You didn't go through. You got a chance. Now you can't even run the primary in Iowa, which has already caused Nevada to scrap this whole app system because they have a caucus too. They're going to scrap it. Candidates are going into New Hampshire with no idea who won. They think Buttigieg is going to win. That's a lot of projections have Buttigieg winning with Sanders coming in second. It doesn't, at this point we have so many uncounted votes. It is mathematically possible for Biden or Klobuchar to win. That probably won't happen. Warren there too, but it's mathematically possible. How can candidates go into New Hampshire and then Nevada and get on the debate stage in Nevada in a couple weeks and have no idea what's going on? This is just insane. And it's, like TJ said, just incredibly disappointing.
Well, we're literally giving them, the Democrats are literally giving the Republicans the ammunition to take down any Democratic attempt at the White House.
Yeah. There was a tweet from Trump's campaign manager. He retweeted he retweeted another tweet talking about how there was an issue with the Democratic Party vote, and basically the Democrats in Iowa came out and said that they were conducting quality control over the re-election results. And Brad Pascal, who's Trump's campaign manager, he tweeted out, "Quality control equals rigged?" ? There's now a lot of questions of, well, what does this mean? Like, yes, there was interference in last year's elections, but people can and also there's been conspiracy theories that in 2016 that Hillary Clinton shouldn't have been the person, the candidate from the Democratic Party. It should have been Bernie Sanders. Of course, there's the Democratic Party has their own ways of the way that they elect, especially with the superdelegates, and so there's always been these issues that were posed, and that's why Bernie ran as a third party candidate, because there were a lot of questions about maybe Bernie should have actually won the nomination, but it is a massive issue for the Democratic Party, and as TJ said, this gives Trump so much ammunition, saying like, look, they have a rigged process, they've got something that's absolutely undemocratic, horrific, and why should we vote for somebody who is just been there out of pure want of the elites of the Democratic Party, something along those lines, and it isn't great. But what was great for Trump's campaign team was the State of the Union. Bo, would you like to fill us in?
Oh, what a night. So we started off, the State of the Union is already late. It's later than it usually has been, as he's been caught up in the impeachment trial. The State of the Union happened the night before the impeachment vote. It started off with controversy right off the bat. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, refused to introduce President Trump. He walked down the aisle. He handed both the Vice President, Mike Pence, and Nancy Pelosi a copy of his speech. Nancy Pelosi extended her hand for a handshake, and Trump refused it. He then went on to make his speech, which was full of several over-exaggerations, several false claims, several over-exaggerations. He also gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to a controversial conservative radio host. But he also did some good things in the speech. He brought the challenger to the Venezuelan presidency, Juan Guaido, for a introduction. He brought in a border patrol officer. He brought in several families. He also reunited a soldier with his family from overseas. And then to top it all off, Nancy Pelosi ripped up his speech behind him, and his speech is over, and the TV cut off. I mean, what a show of just political pageantry and childishness on all sides of the aisle, with different sides breaking into chants and protests, and even a guy being removed, the father of a girl who died in the Parkland school shooting several years ago was removed after he yelled at Trump for making a Second Amendment quote. I mean, people, it was like watching reality TV on there, which is pretty much what U.S. politics is anyway. But this was just it was a crazy night in Washington.
And it's just crazy to see the blowout from this. I mean, we have the White House tweeting, Speaker Nancy Pelosi just ripped up one of the last surviving Tuskegee Airmen, the survival of a child born at 21 weeks, the mourning families of Rocky Jones and Kayla Moeller, a service members reunion, and it's literally just so weird that the president is taking to Twitter to reprimand House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. It's just childish.
Well, thing is that Trump has been doing this since before he got elected. He uses Twitter as his mouthpiece. His covfefe, his absolutely absurd statements, his Alabama's going to be hit by the hurricane and then draw it on the weather map with a Sharpie thing. It's all consistent. That is something consistent in the Trump presidency, his absolute Twitter rage. And he has gone against Adam Schiff during the impeachment, and Nancy Pelosi, Jerry Nadler, Chuck Schumer, all the high-ranking Democrats. He's gone all up against them. And yes, it is very disrespectful that Nancy Pelosi ripped up his speech, but at the same time, you have to understand from Trump's perspective, like her ripping up his speech is a message. He has to use it to get his base on board, saying, look, she has no respect for the presidency. Of course, like, this is the way that Trump runs PR. This is the way that he does everything, is that he just tries to weaponize and mobilize his base, his base of voters to get where he wants to go. He didn't win the popular vote in 2016, but he got the electoral votes, he got his base up and running, and that's what he's running on, his base. And so now we're just waiting on his outbursts. And yes, he did do some good, as Bo said in his speech, and so he's going to focus on that good. He was talking a lot about the economy and how it's grown and how it's the best economy that has ever been in the United States. But you have to get the voters to believe that. In some metrics it has been the best, in some metrics it hasn't. It's all about how you look at the numbers. But this is something. This whole speech, this State of the Union, was basically a Trump rally. He said whatever he wanted in the way that he wanted, and introduced it in whatever he wanted, and introduced whatever he wanted. So this was him having the biggest mouthpiece that he has every year, the State of the Union, to do this propaganda. And yes, you could say, yes, here on the podcast we are very much Democrat leaning and we don't agree with Trump's policies and such, but from Trump's perspective, this is the propaganda that he can get because of his incumbency. He can get that coverage because he is the president, and that's the biggest issue that the Democrats are going to have in November, is to deal with that incumbency and how much power he has as a president.
Yeah, you were talking about like the propaganda and how Nancy, the Trump narrative, the Republican narrative since 2015 when Trump began his election was that the Democrats, they're do-nothing Democrats. They manipulate the system. They've been out to get me with the Mueller report. They've been out to get me with impeachment. They're childish, etc., etc. So instead of Nancy Pelosi going with tradition, going with, taking the tradition, taking the high road, introducing the president, shaking his hand, being attentive to the speech, which she was not. She was reading the speech the whole time. She was rarely looking up. She looked disinterested. She continued to make side comments to Mike Pence despite the fact that he was not listening. She didn't take the high road. She played perfectly into the Trump-McConnell narrative, and she culminated it by standing up and ripping the speech in half. If I'm Nancy Pelosi, I know that my impeachment inquiry hasn't gone well. I'm about to lose tomorrow. I know the president's going to pull some childish maneuver. He's going to tote the economy. He's going to pull a stunt like he did with the Medal of Freedom. He's going to pull a stunt like he did when he decried socialism in the chamber that many socialists exist in. If I'm Nancy Pelosi, I introduce the president in full honors. I go over the top. I'm staring at him the whole time. I'm being super attentive. I'm making notes on the speech. I'm standing whenever he says anything that's good for the whole country, like low African American unemployment. Women being the most unemployed they've ever been. Instead, she pulls a childish maneuver that just again, the Democratic Party never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity, and it's extremely disappointing for someone who would like to see them regain the White House. But, honestly, I'm not even sure why we're surprised. The same antics happened last year. Same antics happened the year before. Yeah. Again, moving to another situation that continues to freaking repeat itself. Turkey and Syria back at it again with conflict. So, Syria, several days ago, launched rocket attacks against Turkey which it killed 6 Turkish soldiers in artillery strikes on Monday. Turkey then responded by deploying F-16 fighter jets against Syria, where they may have killed as many as 35 troops, according to President Erdogan. In response to this, Russia issued a condemnation, which Russia is Syria's backyard. Syria is Russia's backyard. Excuse me. Erdogan warned them that they better stay out. This is Turkish business. Also in response, the United States has canceled a drone program with Turkey, in which we were giving them some of our most cutting-edge drones, which is again furthering the relationship, pulling the relationship apart between Ankara and Washington. So this is all coming in the part of the United States withdrawing from Syria earlier in 2019, and again causing further chaos in the Middle East.
Yeah, and so one of the biggest issues is that the Russians have consolidated with Syria, and that Russians are helping out Syria as much as they can with their air force and with their training, just like the Americans did in the Middle East previously, and how they kept doing that in Iraq. But the thing is that America can't stop the issue between Turkey and Syria because they left. We talked about this on previous episodes of the podcast, and here comes the podcast plug. Can't remember which episode it was, but we definitely talked about how Trump left Syria. You guys, the people who are listening, should probably look it up in previous episodes, and it'll be fine.
Put it in the comments. Put it in the comments of this video.
Exactly. You should. So this is a massive issue, and the United States has no say in it whatsoever. They have no say because they left. They left Syria for good. They left the Kurds for good. And so now the Kurds turn to the Syrian forces, and now the Syrian forces are protecting the Kurds from Turkey. Turkey wants that land. They made their own claims on the Kurdish people being terrorists. They made the claims on the land of the Kurds previously. And so now with Erdogan, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep going. And this is just going to be the case until something sorts itself out. And unfortunately, because there's only 3 people involved in the negotiations, it's Putin, Assad, and Erdogan. There's nothing new happening there from the United States side. The United States has no say in anything that's happening the United States has no say in what's happening in Syria, and it's a big shame, especially with everything that happened in Baghdad that we talked about in a previous episode. And if you want to hear more about Iran and the issues there, we have an Iran special that's already out on our podcast, on our YouTube channel and on our podcast feed. I gotta know. I have to do this, Bo. I'm sorry.
I know we have to get like 3 shameless plugs an episode, or it's not a real politics episode.
Yeah, but the thing is, Bo, is that I do all of them. When are you gonna turn up and plug our own podcast?
Just like the Democratic Party, we've already reduced to infighting. Moving on. I'm sure our resident European will be just so overjoyed to hear this, but Brexit has finally happened.
Well, you say that it's happened. So Brexit has officially happened, but at the same time,
it hasn't happened because we had to renegotiate again.
Yes, exactly. So this is a very long process. This is a very complicated process. This isn't something like Nigel Farage says that, oh no, it's easy. We just cut all ties and that's it. Europe is like the EU. The EU is the UK's biggest trading partner. And the UK economy will not survive without the EU's backing. So there are 2 phases to negotiations. So we talked about negotiations in episode 1 and episode 2 of our podcast. Again, shameless plug. That's the 3rd one, Bo. I'm going to stop after this. Don't worry. But they had the negotiations on the withdrawal agreement and what that means practically and specifically on black and white topics like borders, the status of EU citizens in the UK, and topics like that. But from an economic and trade perspective, they didn't make an agreement. They just said that the UK is going to leave the EU customs union, but that's, again, a black and white issue. Now they're going to negotiate new trade deals and new trade agreements with the UK, between the UK and the EU, to make sure that their economies don't suffer. And they only have until December of 2020 to do so. And many people believe that this is just not going to happen because there's so many little minute details that they have to go through in every single trade deal. This is why you have US and China have only signed a phase one trade deal, because this takes years, because there's so many little intricacies in both UK law and EU law, and you need to get the approval of all the EU members to get through it. And I'm going to make a bold prediction. It's not that bold because, well, a lot of people are saying this is going to be the case, but the UK isn't going to leave the EU customs area as entirely and stop negotiating with the EU in 2020. Boris can't do that. He was unable to leave the EU in October and November. He was unable to do that. He got new elections. He was elected with quite a large majority, and now he was able to leave in January. I feel like there's going to be more of a delay in the time that it takes for them to deal in that trade deal, and this might take a while. So yeah. Unless you guys have anything else to say about Brexit.
No, not really. I mean, I'm not surprised this happened. I mean, it's going to continue. I think you're right. The EU and the UK both need each other very much. The EU needs the UK's military power. They need their prestige. They need their political influence. The UK needs the EU's economy. They need their grain. They need their products. They need their tourism industries. They need their workers. So until they're going to come, I think, to a very similar agreement as the EU's already set up. Just in regards to trade, a little different. The UK will obviously hold some more independence and have more tariffs on them. They'll probably also hit back against the judicial courts. I know the British don't like being held to standards that the EU set in Brussels that they don't have much control over. But other than that, I think the framework deal is going to be very similar to the current EU situation.
Yeah, but the biggest issue is that yes, the UK wants to have more independence from in controlling the produce and making their own regulations from a regulatory standpoint. But thing is that the EU sets very high regulatory standards for everything, and if the UK has more independence, that most likely means, especially under Boris Johnson, that I wouldn't say everything would be deregulated, it's just the regulations would ease. And that would let them trade with the US a lot easier. And that's kind of what the UK is banking on, is that US trade agreement is going to come through because Trump and Boris are going to make a deal. They're going to get that deal through, and that's how the UK is going to survive. Because the thing is, yes, they're going to have a trade deal with the EU, but it's going to be nothing like the common customs market that they had previously. It's going to be new regulations, it's going to be changes, and the UK is going to have, I would say, a worse quality of life because of the deregulation in the quality of food and quality of different products. But they're going to sign most likely a deal with the US to deal with the loss of the EU, so that they're going to have more trade with the US. Yes, that's nice for the UK, that's nice for the US, that's nice for the EU, but all in all, it's gonna be a long drag, and this is gonna drag on for a long time. And here in politics, we believe we want everyone to be healthy. We don't want anyone's diseases to drag on for too long. But unfortunately, the coronavirus is still here, and it is dragging on, and there is more deaths. TJ?
That was hang on. That was the worst transition of all time. That takes the cake. That was terrible. TJ, go ahead.
I'll put in the description that horrible transition coming.
Thank you. So basically, the coronavirus, it's up to 28,000 confirmed cases. most of them residing in mainland China. And some disturbing evidence that has come forward with the coronavirus is the fact that it's highly infective with the R naught ratio, which is the amount of people a healthy individual can infect, is roughly between 1.4 and 3.8 given current WHO and CDC statistics. However, a researcher in Beijing, it was noted that the R naught could be up to 5. So it's highly infective. It's had more cases than there are of SARS. It's just honestly a public health disaster right now. The U.S. has been very slow to respond to it. A lot of countries have been slow to respond. Russia has shut the border down. Mongolia shut the border down. We got a lot of countries in Southeast Asia already having lots of confirmed cases. And in the Philippines, we've already had one confirmed death outside of mainland China. From a health perspective, we don't know where this will go, but it's most likely going to be pandemic levels.
Right, yeah, the United States now has 12 confirmed cases. We also have evacuated our citizens out of Wuhan province, where they're currently being held in quarantine on U.S. military bases in California for at least 2 weeks. I don't know if we go with pandemic level credit, but it's definitely worsening. But the good news is they are making positive research developments, and a vaccine is being developed. They also have discovered the source of the disease. It's coming from bats. So, the mechanisms of medical research are in gear. We're moving towards a vaccine, but, Ebola still is working with a vaccine. Their vaccine they have is not even 100% effective yet. So, and Ebola, the main crisis was back in the 2010s. So now that this disease being so fresh, we're still working on that crisis on that front, but we'll see how it develops.
The worrying thing is, though, is unlike Ebola, it's easier to restrict movements with Ebola. But when it comes to this coronavirus, this novel coronavirus, we're looking at a disease that is spread through air particles and not direct contact like Ebola. And I feel like no matter what efforts we can make, it's going to cause some problems for us.
But the biggest issue with the coronavirus is that we haven't been able to fully control it. And this is what a lot of people have been saying about the Chinese response. It has been poor. And there's been a lot of people that are saying that the numbers that the Chinese government is telling the world are incorrect, are massively lowered. Yes, they built a hospital in 10 days to deal with the coronavirus, but that's just the way that the Chinese construction business works. They can build a lot of things very quickly. It is not effective. That's why there's a lot of people saying that this is now a global health crisis. I believe the CDC and the WHO has now said that this is a global health crisis. And the issue with the coronavirus is that this could very easily turn into a pandemic. And the more people that are infected, the more chances that the virus has time to mutate and has time to change and can infect more people. And we can't do anything to isolate every single specific strain of that virus. And that's what the issue with the pandemic is. Granted, the coronavirus is still, firstly, it is mild, but people have died, and it is localized, and we're currently, the world is currently controlling relatively well. I wouldn't say very well, but kind of well, the way that it transcends the borders, and there is that 14-day incubation period where the coronavirus is still infective, but it's not going to show any symptoms. That's why in the United States, when the planes from Wuhan are coming in, the people are being incubated for 14 days, is that if they don't show any symptoms within 14 days, that means they're clear. But it is still an infective virus. And that's what's the scariest thing, is that a person with no symptoms can be wherever he wants. He has a 14-day window to infect as many people as he wants, to to just be there. And so this is why the coronavirus is scary. It is scary. Of course, we here at Politics don't want to fearmonger here to say that this is gonna kill the entire world, because this isn't. We are here. We've got some of the most advanced. We have the most advanced medicine that we've ever had. We will be able to isolate, get a vaccine, and be able to cure the virus. It is going to happen. We don't know when, but it is going to happen. And I believe that last episode we ended on quite a sad note with the death of Kobe Bryant, but I feel like we should end this episode on a moment of hope, because there are a lot of people saying a lot of things, saying a lot of things that show the coronavirus is gonna be a pandemic. Everyone's gonna die. This is gonna be horrific. It's not. Especially people in the United States. There's only 12 cases in the United States. Yes, it is more than Ebola, but you can't compare the two. They are different viruses. They have different symptoms, and the way that we control it is very effective. And I feel like this should be a message of hope, is that we will be able to overcome this. Yes, this is not going to be great, but it's going to be fine. Everything, every little thing is going to be okay.
All right, we just got copyright striked. So on that note,
I didn't know my singing was that good. I wasn't even singing.
On that note, we'd like to thank you all for tuning into episode 9 of Politics. Please like and subscribe. I haven't said that yet, but now we're going to start that. So also, shameless plug, watch our other episodes. Thank you, everybody.